Great. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. We are so excited to be able to kick things off and to really dig in and have a conversation here about the opportunities around the Byrne JAG crisis intervention funding, these grant opportunities that are a part of the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. And really, we think funding opportunities that have a tangible opportunity to be able to have a proactive impact in preventing gun violence before it happens. My name is Christian Heine, and I'm the Vice President of Policy at and Programs here at Brady. But I am really joined by such incredible experts that are not only going to be able to contextualize the opportunities that exist with this funding, but really ways in which all of you, who are the stakeholders, who are the individuals who have either a vested interest in these crisis intervention programs being effective, but you've also been tasked with making sure that just because the money exists, now becomes the real difficult part, right? We don't just need money to be available. We need to make sure that it gets into the right hands, into the hands of those who are going to be able to have the greatest impact. And one aspect of these overall challenges has got to be thinking through ways in which we can inform the public, the ways in which these can be successful, these programs can save lives. I just want to say, as a point of order and for logistics, what the agenda looks like today. Right now, we're sort of welcoming folks here, but I want to make sure that we have time to contextualize the issue that we face. And really give space for each of these experts to be able to dig in and describe the opportunities that exist within these grants. We're very lucky to have Michelle Garcia, who works with the Bureau of Justice Assistance in the Department of Justice, who is helping overseeing the grant program and making sure that those states that are applying have the adequate opportunity to be able to utilize these funds in the ways in which they've been designed. We've got Rowena Patrick, with the Ad Council, who has been doing a lot of incredible work. The Ad Council has been doing a lot of incredible work to specifically think about ways in which we can reach the communities who need to understand extreme risk laws, the power to which extreme risk laws have to intervene at critical times, and to make sure that they know, in many instances, families themselves, stakeholders, how they can engage that policy to prevent gun violence before it happens, including firearm suicide. We're going to talk about a California case study. Cuco Rodriguez with Hope and Heal Fund is going to talk about the incredible innovative work that Hope and Heal has been doing in California to really think about, when we talk about outreach, when we talk about the communities at which we need to reach, when we talk about a public health approach, what does that really look like? And how do we make sure that these funds are making their way to communities most impacted by gun violence at large? And last but certainly not least, our very own Colleen Creighton, who oversees the End Family Fire Initiative here at Brady, is going to talk about the End Family Fire program, a public health, public service campaign that is oriented towards really involved research to speak directly to gun owners, to describe gun responsibility, which includes safely and securing storing weapons and the kind of impact that can have in reducing gun violence. A public education campaign that has been incredibly successful, so that you all know that there are resources from all of these speakers, so that folks don't need to reinvent the wheel, that there are experts that you can tap into and talk to now to really dig in and best understand how these policies and funds can be best utilized. So I'm really excited to be able to talk with everybody. We'll try to leave some time for questions and answers so that we can dig in on the things most interesting to each of you. But let's just jump right in so that we don't miss anything here. First and foremost, we want to talk about the problem, right? I think that at the end of the day, the reason why there was this bipartisan effort in Congress to address gun violence in all of its forms is because gun violence, frankly, is a public health epidemic that's impacting Americans of every background and every community. And we need to do something different. It's a uniquely American problem, and one that is having really jarring impact in the way that we look at it. And frankly, we're showing this chart here that talks about what gun violence death looks like in terms of homicide. But a huge part of our focus today is going to be talking about what gun violence looks like for too many Americans, for 3 out of 5 Americans in this country when we talk about firearm suicide. Something that is in large part preventable and preventable because of the crisis intervention programs that have proven successful in extreme risk protection orders, as well as research that shows that safe storage can have a tangible impact in preventing these kinds of violence as well. I want to talk about this, right? And let's be clear, the numbers are jarring, right? We know that data that we have, the most recent available to us, tells us that gun violence has reached record levels. We know that over the last 2 years from that available data that we have, that gun homicides have increased by 45%, gun suicides increased by 10%, and the COVID pandemic has had a tangible impact in what gun violence looked like in our communities, and it was already awful. And what's worse is gun violence for these communities, for these individuals, it's not abstract. It's not the jarring large numbers that we're talking about. It's not even the gun injury that we don't talk enough about, which is 2 to 3 times the numbers that I just referenced. I can tell you firsthand, I'm a survivor of gun violence. In 2005, both of my parents were shot in a horrific incident in Southern California. My dad survived by the grace of God, multiple gunshot wounds, but my mom was shot and killed with a single bullet to the back. For so many people, this is not an abstract issue, it's a very tangible one. And the ripple effects of the trauma that we experience, especially knowing that these instances can be prevented, is something that we have to go on and live with and never truly find a way to get over. Our lives are forever changed. These tools, like the extreme risk laws, have been proven through research to be incredibly effective at preventing tragedies before they occur. Safe storage is something that can tangibly have an impact in preventing tragedies before they occur. You all, as administrators of these grants, of trying to make sure that the information is getting out there, you have the opportunity to not only make sure that these laws are implemented through those that are implementing it, but to also make sure that the public best understands what they can do. So let's talk about it. The Byrne State Crisis Intervention Program is something that is going to proactively make sure that states have the ability to not only just talk about these policies and pass them, but to make sure that they're effectively implemented. I see a picture here of Amanda Wilcox, whose daughter Laura was killed in 2001. And compellingly, one of the first extreme risk laws that was ever passed in California, talked to the legislator about, had this law been in place, her daughter might be alive today. I firmly believe similarly that had this law been in place in 2005, my parents could be alive today. For those of you that have this law in your state, you have the ability to make that happen. We know that there is approximately $750 million that has been allocated for funding these gun violence prevention programs over the course of the next 5 years. That first batch of funding, which Michelle will talk about, has been awarded. And this is one of the critical aspects of the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act that is hopeful in being able to have an impact and prevent families like mine, families in your very own community, from experiencing what this epidemic truly feels like. So without further ado, I am going to turn this over to our incredible panelists. We're going to start with Michelle to go over specifically what this program looks like, what the awards have been like, and what steps are next for those of you out there trying to figure out how you can make sure that this gets in the right capable hands. So Michelle, with that, please feel free to take over.
Thank you so much, Christian, and thank you so much for sharing your own story of gun violence. I think it is helpful for all of us to remind ourselves of the very real lives that are touched by this every day. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. I think one of the valuable things about the Byrne State Crisis Intervention Program is that it allows for a lot of different types of activities in order to try and prevent gun violence, create safer communities, and ultimately saves lives. One particular element are around extreme risk protection order programs. The funding in the SCIP program can be used to implement those programs, to provide training for those who are involved in developing and implementing those. And that can be law enforcement officers, behavioral health providers, it can be community members, family members. That it also accounts for support for communicating and raising awareness about these programs and what life-saving resources they can be. The one thing I do want to note, there is a prohibition on using federal funds for lobbying, so none of the funds can be used to either directly or directly impact enactment, repeal, modification of any types of laws. ERPOs are just one piece of what these dollars can be used for. There's also opportunity for using it at other points in which we might be able to intervene. So that can include specialized court programs, gun courts, drug mental health veterans courts, behavioral health crisis intervention and deflection programs, as well as funding for law enforcement to be able to safely store and track firearms. Next slide, please. As Christian mentioned, there's $750 million for the Byrne State Crisis Intervention Program. It's $150 million a year. We recently made awards for 2 years of funding. Because of timing, we were able to do a solicitation for fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 2023 of awards. Anyone who's interested in learning more about the grant program, I'd strongly encourage you to go to our website, look at the solicitation that we released that talks about all the types of activities that can be supported. I want to specifically highlight the link to access the frequently asked questions. We heard from so many of you on this call about the types of questions you had around how the dollars can be used. What are the requirements? What are the limitations? What do we need to know about Second Amendment protections? And all of that we tried to combine into a single resource with the FAQ. So please definitely look at those. Not next slide, but can you click to bring up the second half of the slide? To date, we've made 49 awards totaling over $230 million. We actually have the solicitation open again right now until March 13th to provide an opportunity for the 7 states and territories that had not applied under the original solicitation to submit an application if they would like. So there is a possibility that this award amount might increase this year. If you want to see what states did apply for, you can again go to the website and you can see the awards that have been made and a brief description of what those awards are going to be used for. Next slide. But one thing to know is that those descriptions are in many cases going to be very broad and very general. And that is because the way this solicitation was designed is that every state must develop a crisis intervention advisory board to inform and guide the state's plan about how they are going to use these funds to reduce gun violence. Within the solicitation, it lists out minimal representation that must be included on that crisis intervention advisory board. That includes representatives from law enforcement, from the community, court, prosecution, behavioral health providers, victim services, and legal counsel. We really wanted it to be a multidisciplinary approach to addressing gun violence. And again, this is minimum requirement. States are able to have representation from other entities, other professions, and have multiple members representing any of these entities. We did recognize that many states already have similarly structured boards, working groups, task forces in place, and so they can use those existing entities as long as, again, it meets those minimum requirements. And as the grantees, as the states go through the process of accessing the funding, they will be required to demonstrate that that board has had an active role in developing the plan and has ultimately approved the plan. We're going to be hosting a webinar for the states on the SCIP program, ideally later this month, where we're going to walk through that process, what they're going to need to submit for their plans and their budgets, what the process for subgrantee award approval will be. And it'll also provide an opportunity for us to introduce all the grantees to their training and technical assistance providers. Next slide, please. And I wanted to highlight that we are thrilled to bring on 3 national organizations to work with us in implementing the SCIP program. We've got Johns Hopkins University, the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges, and the National Criminal Justice Association, all who are going to be providing training and technical assistance to grantees as they develop and implement uses for these funds. Johns Hopkins will specifically be supporting states that are developing and implementing extreme risk protection order programs. The National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges is going to be working with states that are using funds to support state, local, and tribal courts in their work. And then the National Criminal Justice Association is going to be helping states gather and collect and report the data that we're going to use to evaluate the efficacy of these programs. I also want to note that in addition to the dedicated funding that is available under the State Crisis Intervention Program, there's also the Byrne JAG dollars, which Christian briefly mentioned. But under the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, an additional purpose area was added to those Byrne JAG dollars that allows states to use the JAG dollars for these same areas. So NCJA is going to be supporting us both for the SCIP grantees and states that use their JAG dollars in that way. And as I said, more information on all of this we're going to be making available to the states and to grantees as we move forward later this month. Next slide, please. And here's my contact information. Please do not hesitate to reach out to me with any questions or comments that you have, any information that we can provide to help you as you're working on these programs. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Michelle. That was an incredible presentation, and really looking forward to hearing some of those next steps. I know you all have been really thoughtful in this interdisciplinary approach. I think making sure that this information gets out to the right people and that the funding does what's intended. So really thankful to all of your leadership. I would like to now pivot, especially after hearing about how these funds can be used for more than just extreme risk laws, right? I think what we just heard Michelle describe as sort of allowable use and what DOJ has been putting out there is to really think about crisis intervention at large. And in particular, it's, some of this is about direct implementation, but also how do we make sure that, and when you dig in and look at the details that they've laid out through these programs, how do we also make sure that the public is aware that these programs exist, whatever it may be, and to better make sure that they are aware of tools that they have at their disposal. One thing we often talk about here is that the people who really, truly are going to be tangible allies in preventing gun violence from happening are those that are closest to individuals in crisis. So getting this information to those individuals is really critical. And the Ad Council, who is doing incredible work, and Roe Patrick, who oversees a lot of this work, has been really trying to think through this in advance of these dollars becoming available to make sure that all of the states that are going to be taking part in this process have a wealth of knowledge to pull from, rather than needing to reinvent the wheel, or more importantly, work in silos in individual states when there could be overall messaging that could be critical for any kind of public awareness or messaging around these tools. So without further ado, Ro, please take it away.
Thank you, Christian. And thanks so much for having me today. As Christian mentioned, I think we want to serve as a resource for all of you who is in this space, working in states and other stakeholders that are working in ERPO, to really think about this from a public standpoint, talking to the American public and talking to those that may know someone who's at risk, and really think about, if we think about public awareness and education, what are the right messaging? Where are they just right now? And how do we kind of help move the needle? So in a joint partnership with the Joyce Foundation, the Ad Council has been working on a pretty robust research project to really get under that. So on the next slide, our objectives is to speak to folks in the 19 states in DC that currently have ERPO laws. And we are talking to sort of our general population target that includes gun owners and non-gun owners. We are also talking to petitioners like law enforcement and clinicians, just to get a little bit of a different perspective. But overall, looking to understand just baseline, what is the awareness of ERPO right now in their states, and do they know how they work? And if they do, what are the public perception of these laws? In the research, we do a little bit of education. So once they learn, even if they don't know anything about ERPO, we teach them a little bit just to have a conversation. So once they know, we kind of ask about what the likelihood to explore, discuss, and potentially petition an ERPO in a relevant situation. And then, of course, we're in the comms business. So we also had developed about 6 message frames. And these are just different ways for us to talk about ERPO and different ways to sort of explain it and what you can do around the law that, our hope is that it would increase awareness, knowledge, and adoption. So these are the overall objectives as we go into this project. Our research plan have 4 phases. And the first phase really isn't part of the active kind of design of the research. What we did was in August of last year, we brought together a group of partners and experts, really folks that are working in this space every day. So it included our gun violence prevention friends. It included folks from mental health and suicide prevention, domestic violence, law enforcement, public health, the leading academics that are really working on this issue. We also brought in state and local government folks, as well as DAs and prosecutors that are really on a regular basis working on these petitions. And we gathered everyone together, one, for us to really get a grounding and a state of the state as to what is happening, on ERPO as we speak, as of August of 2022. What are some of the biggest challenges and what are some of the biggest opportunities? As we then went and took all of those insights and designed the research plan. So the first stage of the actual research was a qualitative phase, which is what I'll probably speak the most today, because that has been completed as of end of last year. That was the first kind of our first method to really understand what are the attitudes and knowledge and behaviors right now. And we talked to the general public as well as law enforcement and clinicians in that research. Then we took all of that learning into our next phase, which is a quantitative phase. This is a pretty large scale survey where we started to more kind of broadly identify trends. We revised some of our messaging just coming out of that qualitative research and test it with a much larger group of respondents to start to understand, what's working, what's not working. So that fielding actually completed very, very recently, just the last couple of weeks. Our hope is to have a final report out to all of the stakeholders by late spring of this year. And then following that, we have one more round of qualitative research. The specific goal there is to really pressure test those message frames and how do we communicate about ERPO, specifically for the development of a toolkit, as well as any further public education development. So if you go to the next slide, I want to share with you all a very sort of quick top line of the qualitative research that we did, since we did wrap that piece up. And, that's some early findings that we can share. So what we did was 71 webcam interviews. So they were sort of Zoom interviews in the states where there is ERPO law. So 19 states in DC. The field work was done in October of last year. So just a couple of months ago. And we did 30, what we're calling Gen Pop interviews. These are one-on-one interviews with the moderator. And it included, again, gun owners as well as non-gun owners, and those were 1 hour. Then we took 10 of those respondents and invited their close friends and family in a triad quad environment, also with a moderator, and had a similar conversation just to see if their responses were different when they were with their close friends and family. So those were a little bit longer, for about 90 minutes. And then we did 31 professional interviews. So the 31 included 16 law enforcement. So these are law enforcement officers with arresting capacity. They don't have to have personal experience petitioning an ERPO, but they definitely have to have arresting capacity. We also talked to 15 clinicians as well. So these, again, were IDIs or one-on-one interviews with a moderator, and those were for an hour. So we go to the next slide. Here are some of the early findings, what we learned in qualitative. And I'll just preface this by, from a research standpoint, obviously qualitative, while we did talk to a good number of folks, it's still a relatively small sample. So these are really directional learnings to help us refine the quantitative, where we talk to thousands and thousands of individuals. So take it for directional learning, but I think we're hearing similar things in the quantitative. First off, the threshold for when an individual should act on a person at risk is unclear. So there were a lot of sort of concern about, like, if I do it too early, maybe I'm overreacting. But if I do it too late, then maybe it's just too late and the tragic situation would have happened. So there's a lot of sort of just concerns and worry that, like, I'm not really sure where the right time for me to take action. And then, specifically around your close family member, some just worried that doing so may damage the trust between the petitioner and the person at risk. And it felt like just a lot of pressure on the individual to sort of take that first step. But having said that, I think what was heartening is that extreme risk laws were generally very well received by most participants. And when we sort of talked about what it is, most thought that when used effectively, and I'll put that word really in bold, when it's used effectively, it can save lives, right? They said, yeah, if somebody is displaying behavior that they may hurt themselves or others, yeah, they shouldn't have access to a firearm. So that logically made sense. But as we talked a little bit more, a lot of these sort of ingrained cynicism about just our process, that, can we really do this quick enough to help a crisis? Could it be misused? Especially one theme that came up was, like, could it be misused for revenge, which is something we hear also on the domestic violence side. There was a lot of worry about misuse, specifically from communities where there's some distrust of law enforcement. So there were definitely things that came up, but we started to dig into the details that raised doubt of the efficacy in practice. In theory, highly supportive. Definitely think it makes sense. There was a lot of questions about, like, how does it actually happen in reality? But overall, I think the opportunity that we see coming out of qualitative is that the awareness of ERPO is relatively low, really across the board. I think some folks have heard of it. They've heard of, red flag laws. It's been in the news, but the specifics and how it is implemented, there's very, very little awareness of that. So there's the opportunity for education. And I also think, as we were talking in these interviews, a lot of folks were like, okay, well, who are the petitioners? When do I know what to do? How do they decide when somebody get their gun back? So there are a lot of specific questions that I think, as we think about messaging and public education, that we really need to answer in order for us to kind of close that loop and close that circle. Lastly, if you can go back to the last slide, as I mentioned, we had tested a number of different messages as part of this research. And, there wasn't an overall winning message, which is totally good. And that's why we do this research. But there were elements of each of those that really resonated, that we took that finding, revised the message frames, and have tested it in quantitative. And some of those that rose to the top as, things that were really working well were terms like short-term, temporary, that ERPOs were, a civil procedure that's not a punishment. I mean, those were all words that really resonated. So we're taking that into the next phase to continue to sort of pressure test. Okay, you can go to the next slide. Thank you. So I'll quickly just talk about, this big research project. The output of it is sort of two things. One is the final report. We will share all of the findings, but the other piece is a public toolkit, or you can call it a communications playbook. We want to do this research to help everybody that's working on ERPO. So the purpose of this is to have messaging that we have tested, to know that it is effective in talking about ERPO. So the components of this toolkit will be the target audience insight, whether that is gun owners, non-gun owners, families with those at risk, or law enforcement, as that is a big part of our research. What are the motivating messages for each of these audiences? And then who we're sending things out to. It is the public toolkit, but specifically, we are hoping to, get that into the hands of folks that are working on ERPO, including, all of you and all of your partners, as well as, GVP groups and mental health groups, as well as law enforcement. So the next slide. So just wanted to get some dates on y'all's calendar. We did a stakeholder briefing, a webinar back in December to share the qualitative report, but we are currently working on the full report that includes our quantitative study. The public release will be April 27th. This will be released online, so you can definitely go ahead and read that. But a week following, on May 4th, we will be scheduling a webinar to have our research team really walk through that in detail and answer questions. So I know my email will be at the end of this presentation. Please reach out to me if you're interested in getting put on that mailing list. We'd love to have all of you there and really share the research that we have learned. And then later in May, we will be developing that toolkit and playbook, and we will be scheduling a second briefing just on that toolkit and playbook. So hope to see you all at our public share out, and definitely let me know if you have any questions.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Ro, and thanks for the incredible work that Ad Council is doing around this. I know, especially trying to make sure that the messages that we are going out with are effective is going to be critical and important here, and especially for this group of stakeholders to understand. I understand. I want to get things to Kuko as quickly as possible. I know that we have so much to discuss. It's hard to in the short periods of time that we have. I want to make sure I get to all of our speakers. So without further ado, Kuko, I'm going to kick things to you to talk about how we think about the communities in which we're engaging, and specifically what a true public health approach should look like here as these tools are being utilized. So Kuko, please take it from here. And I think you're on mute, Kuko.
Sorry. Thank you. Appreciate that. I'm gonna jump right into this really quick for everybody, given the short amount of time that we have. Needless to say, our organization has been involved with the state here in California, with the Office of Emergency Services, which works with the governor's office on developing kind of an information campaign. Really two-tiered. One is the media piece, but the other one is really a service provision piece in terms of, and specifically as it relates to communities of color. So that's kind of framing it. But what I want to jump into is kind of just some of the quick lessons learned. But the overarching message I hope folks get is that, there's a lot of folks here that are doing similar work, and we did the same thing as Ro talked about, which is we convene folks that are doing this, trying to crowdsource as much as we can about what we know, what we don't know, what we should do. One of the biggest things across the board, regardless of what state we were talking to, is that the weakest area that we have in terms of ERPOs and GVROs has to do with communities of color and information about how they view it, baselining, a lot of this thing. So that's one of the big areas that we focused on. So I would hope that folks reach out to and connect with people here, because for us, there's quite a few takeaways I think that folks can benefit from. The biggest one, I think, to kind of frame this is that, the gun violence training order in California has been instituted since 2016, and yet to date, I think something like only 25% of the population is even aware of that. And as I said, here in California, we're developing some materials in terms of video messaging, those types of things, what they call evergreen materials. So as the Ad Council, we've done a lot of the background research to create these, and so including materials in other languages. So one of the big lessons learned from this, I would say, is that one, you need to develop a robust information campaign for the public to understand that this is instituted, because I think we're an example of something in place that hasn't been utilized. And then more importantly, what we do know is that the systems that are aware of it, which are law enforcement, are utilizing it at super high rates, like 95% of the GVROs instituted in California are coming primarily from law enforcement. So clearly the public is not aware of that, and that's really wasn't designed as a law enforcement tool. This was designed as a broader tool. That's why it's a civil order, not a criminal order, yet law enforcement's utilizing it in a variety of different ways. And again, I'm not saying that they're not part of it, but at the same time, the general public is not aware of it when you compare that use with other states. The other part of it is, again, as I said before, I think a big lesson learned is please recycle materials. There's no need to reinvent the wheels. I think that we can learn from a lot of this. Let's see how much we can utilize and save money. And more importantly, I would suggest that you invest some of those resources in differential treatment and service, especially for BIPOC communities, or messaging for those communities of color that may not have the same services or awareness or information about gun violence, storage, gun violence training, or other things. And really what I mean by that is that resources for communities, especially communities of colors, to navigate systems if they want to institute an ERPO, but also resources that can provide alternative forms of intervention, especially for communities that have this trust of law enforcement. And let us not forget that this only applies, I mean, we talk about GVRO, it only applies to legal guns. So if community members come to you and saying somebody has a gun and it's not legal, hopefully you're not going to say, well, sorry, we don't do that, we only do legals. That we have resources because people are still in need of services. And again, some community-based organizations or communities that rely on those organizations may be going to those organizations for support. So creating alternative avenues to an ERPO, or communities, immigrant communities who have high mistrust of law enforcement because of deportation, those types of things. The next, I think that the next big lesson learned is that we've learned is, please don't look at this only from a PR or comms lens. Comms materials are helpful, but they don't increase service capacity in terms of service provision. Like on the service end, I come from the service end, those materials are helpful in terms of service provision, but they don't really resolve the gap that exists in terms of understanding about GVROs and the complexity of instituting these sometimes and helping people navigate through these. So don't confuse the two. And I think that what we've learned is that we want to have two kind of separate kind of paths. One that's looking at it in terms of communications and dissemination of information, and then another one that's looking at what are the gaps in terms of service provision to help people institute these or navigate these systems, because you're involving the courts in California, you're involving law enforcement, that creates some challenges for communities who typically don't do very well or have this trust of these systems because they are complex. Other high level kind of learning in terms of takeaways for us from a community of color or BIPOC perspective is that a lot of communities of color, we've done a lot of focus groups with them, they have some challenges in terms of how to position the use of this ERPO or GVRO in California because of the involvement of law enforcement and the courts. So that's just a reality. And the other thing that we hear from these communities is that, again, they're hopeful that the GVRO is not the only option. Like, what else is there? If we can't use this, then what? And so if we don't have the then what, then this is the only option. That will be exercised only after they have exercised all other possibilities, or it's an extreme situation. And I think that again, that speaks to the issue of differential responses that we need to put in place, so that if a GVRO is not the likely tool that's going to be used, that we have other forms of services or interventions that we can kind of look at that. And for me, the big meta lesson learned from this is that, to me, although ERPO and GVRO solve some issues, it also doesn't solve it for everybody. And this is to be another example of the absence of BIPOC communities and voices in the creation of this. And now it isn't to say that this doesn't solve a lot of problems, but it also makes assumptions about access, capacity, trust, in systems that clearly differ from for communities of color. And so to me, the ideal would have been a GVRO and ERPO that not only addresses this in terms of the way it's designed now, but also creates some alternatives for these other communities of colors in terms of resources and other alternatives to GVRO if they so desire, or creating avenues for funding for organizations to help communities with that as well. So I'll stop there. There's a lot more we can unpack, but feel free to connect with me if you have additional information. We really urge that because we hope that folks don't have to start from scratch on this issue.
Fantastic, Cuco, and really incredible work you and Hope and Heal have been doing to really think through how we can reach communities, not just through a communication strategy, as you said, but really work on the ground, which is going to be critical. I am going to try to move along quickly because I know we have a lot to get through still. Colleen Creighton oversees our End Family Fire program here at Brady. And I just will note real quick, because I see this question in the chat, if you look at the allowable use of these funds, you can see that it's broadly oriented towards crisis intervention programs. They talk about safe storage as a part of that programming. And so certainly states should be thinking beyond strictly extreme risk laws, especially because so many of the states that applied for these grants exist as states without extreme risk laws themselves, but they can still do work around crisis intervention. And that really is what Colleen's going to talk about, and the role that public education can play. Also, keeping an eye on time. I know that it's going to be hard to do Q&A, so please feel free to jump in on the Q&A part of the Zoom if you have questions to ask, and we'll try to get in there as well to make sure that we can get to the questions that folks may have. So Colleen, please feel free to jump in.
Thank you, Christian. And next slide, I'll go pretty quickly because I know we want to get to the Q&A, but like Cuco said, not recreating the wheel. And Family Fire is a fantastic model that we've built on safe storage, and I'll walk you through a couple of the key components. Now, in understanding how to tackle the issue, we looked at the problem. Obviously, here are some data points that we looked at: the 8 kids a day that are injured from guns within the home, the 4.6 million of children living in a home with an unsecured gun, the 2/3 of all gun deaths by suicide, and then nearly 90% of all suicides with a firearm are fatal. And I come to the space from the suicide space. I come to Brady from the American Association of Suicidology, where I was their CEO. So we took a look at all of this and said, where can we make a great impact, and how do we make a difference? And so the solution, one of the things that we're looking at here is how to tackle this issue. So we reached out to Ad Council. We realized use the power of a social norm campaign, like seatbelt use, drunk driving. And one way to do that was really introduce a term. We need to give it a name so that we have an approach that would fit to how to impact that. We came out with Family Fire. And what that means, everybody's heard the term friendly fire. Well, family fire is an incident of violence with guns in the home, unintentional injury, suicide, access, where there's either a death or injury. So by calling it Family Fire, we now have a problem. We can have a solution. One of the ways to do that once you have that is amplify consumer communications, some training, put some on the ground tools to come at it, and then also look at behavior change. Are we making a difference? And I'll talk a little bit about the hypersaturation point, in that we took a state and we really are going deep into one state to figure out how to approach that. So I know Ad Council does a great way of describing this. And once you have the problem, you go at it with both a ground game and an air game. And so with a public service across the country, but also an on the ground approach in different communities. Next slide. A little bit about partnering with Ad Council. They're a fantastic partner on this. We don't get political. We stay completely out of politics. We don't go after gun owners. We don't politicize it in any way. We don't say you have a gun or don't have a gun. It's, hey, everyone needs to come together on this issue. We just want to save lives. So if you do have a gun in the home, we want you to keep it safe and secure and safely stored. So we don't do us versus them, and we don't challenge any rights to own a firearm or things like that. Next slide. A little bit about working. Everything that we do here, it's not taken lightly. As you'll see, as we work with Ad Council, everything from 12 months to 18 months. So it's really, looking at the problem, what research is out there, where's there a gap, qualitative, quantitative research, lit searches, focus groups throughout the entire process. I've sat on both ends of this with my role here at Brady, with my previous role. I've seen both sides of this, and it's phenomenal at the amount of work that goes into this to ensure that what we're creating has impact, but also resonates with the end user. Next slide. And talking about impact, look at this phenomenal measures on the back end. And so what we do is everything that we do with End Family Fire is measured, and it's continuously measured, not just a pre and post, but every month we're saying, is it moving? Is it moving in the right direction? If not, what do we need to course correct? And the first one we took a look at is gun owners. Did you see the ad? Are you expressing concern? Are you concerned now about increasing the risk of a tragedy by having a gun in the home? And you'll see that's 140% increase. So previously they may have not even made the connection. Now, I do have small kids in the house. Are they able to access my gun? Maybe I should think about this from a different perspective. Or I'm going through, a tumultuous period, a time of crisis right now. Maybe I shouldn't have access to lethal means. The second item here is, gun owners who saw the ad. Are you then going to seek out additional information? Are you going to go to endfamilyfire.org? Are you going to go and find out where I can keep my gun safely stored? What kind of box? What kind of safe? What kind of trigger lock? What do I need to know? And you'll see that we had an impact of 310% change in gun owners who saw the ad, sought out additional information. And then the third, okay, their perception's changing, their attitude's changing, but are they actually behavior changing? And they are. 48% of the gun owners who saw the ads changed where they store the gun. And a lot of this we heard, oh, but I keep it just in a box on the top shelf. We had just a case that came up yesterday that said, my son, he likes video games, he doesn't like books, so it's fine. It's up on the bookshelf in the corner. And the older sibling found it, saw the other boys playing with it, and was able to, reach out to the parent and say, this is not safely stored. And so you'll see that as we get out to more communities, we want to see that number increase even more. Next slide. A little bit about EFF, just the kind of trajectory. We launched in 2018 with our unintentional injury. 2020, we launched the suicide spots. 2021, we did a whole series on veterans, specifically targeting veteran suicide by firearm. And then service never stops. We gave that a tagline. And then you'll see this past year, 2022, what we did is we really are looking at hypersaturating a market in a specific Missouri state program. Next slide. What does this look like for Missouri? So in working with the Missouri Foundation for Health, we took our existing End Family Fire campaign. As you know, Missouri is a very, there's a high gun owning state. They have a high firearm suicide rate. We said, we really need to get into this community and kind of see what's going to work. And so we did kind of that top down approach too. And working with Missouri Foundation for Health, we're using creatively coordinated campaign tailored to Missouri, reaching gun owners, but also doing an on the ground grassroots approach as well. And you can kind of see there, it's the tailored PSAs, social media handles. So I encourage everybody here to follow End Family Fire Missouri on all the social channels. We launched it in April 2022. Pickup has been phenomenal. You'll see kind of the pro bono media, picking up billboards, picking up PSAs, picking up radio spots, picking up TV spots. The 7 grantees in the ground. This is a cool program where they're all developing their own approaches in their own community, what works. Some are targeting schools, some are targeting law enforcement, some are targeting just youth in general. And they're all working about coming at this from the same approach. They're tailoring the PSAs that we're creating to their own community. And then, we're presenting, we're on the ground to suicide prevention networks and actually seeing what's there, what do we have, how can we leverage these together? Next slide, and you'll see the impact from all of these pieces together. These are just a kind of a series of ads, the website that we're doing, and Facebook, Instagram. And I encourage everybody we don't have time today to go through everything, but just definitely take a minute to go visit those sites, follow us, like us, share our information. Next slide. And then the impact, you can kind of see the difference that we're making. So this is the kind of the nationwide trend since 2018, not just the past year. Whereas the national one is 155% more likely. You have 385% more likely and 15% more likely to change. Look at End Family Fire Missouri specifically. In just the short time that we've been there, not for 5 years like we have been with the national campaign, we've already seen a difference in 40% of gun owners are more likely to see that there's a risk in the home with an unsecured gun, 440% more likely to seek out additional information on safe storage, and 32% more likely to actually change where they're storing their gun. And so, I mean, it's been about a full year. It'll be a full year in April when we launched, which tells us we're tracking in the right direction. We still have another year to go with this project, so we're excited to see it move forward. Next slide. And this is a short video just to kind of give you an idea of what the sense of our videos. We have, I think it's over 110 different variations of ads that we've done, and there's a whole segment of PSAs that we've done since 2018. So here's just a quick snippet to kind of give you a sizzle reel of what those look like.
Hey, Dad, we have a gun.
Why do you ask that, kiddo?
Can I play with it?
No, absolutely not. It's not a toy. You know that. Anyway, I need it to protect you, your sister and Mom.
But what about the 8 kids who get shot every day by mistake? Where do you keep it?
It's hidden.
I bet it's on the top shelf of the closet, under your sweatshirts. Is it loaded? You always told me to be curious.
No, that's not what I meant.
My name is Teresa Barber.
My name is Charles Taway.
I'm Tommy Anderson.
My name is Siobhan DeBar.
90% of suicide attempts with a gun are fatal.
Safe gun storage can prevent gun suicide.
The majority of veteran suicides are from gun suicides.
Female veterans die by suicide more often than female non-veterans.
My service never stops.
Our service never stops.
All right, I'm in the house.
Okay, what do you see?
I think I just heard something. I'm heading upstairs.
Okay, I am almost there.
I'm in the bedroom.
Okay.
Oh, shit. It's not here.
What?
The gun's not here.
What do you mean? Where is it?
Cameron, are you in there? Open the door. Cam! Come on, Cam.
We could be the healing. We could be the flower.
And that just gives you a sense of what we've done. We're in all 50 states. You can see the impact of our program. Our goal is to really get it out to more communities and to save lives.
Great. Well, thanks so much for that, Colleen. And I think what an incredible representation. I think everybody here, all of our panelists, for digging in on the various aspects of this funding, the ways in which it can be used, while each and every one of your states are thinking through ways in which you can drive impact with these dollars. At a minimum, I hope folks are able to walk away and really think through, like Kuko said, how do you tap into work that already exists, work that we know is effective, to make sure that we are able to drive impact in each and every state. And hopefully some of the folks here, we're all incredibly excited to engage with you, to think through ways in which public awareness campaigns can be a part of that work. Even looking in the question and answers, I know one of the questions that remains on there is talking specifically to the Club Q shooting, and the challenges that exist in potential quote unquote sanctuary cities where sheriffs are saying that they're not going to basically enforce the laws on the books and utilize these policies to protect people. I think a lot of what we're describing here is how do we make sure that we're engaging the community so that they know that they have a role that they can play in protecting their loved ones as well. And that doesn't have to be purely in states that have extreme risk laws, as we just saw through the End Family Fire programming as well, promoting safe storage, thinking through other ways to intervene for individuals in crisis can have life-saving impacts. And that's what we're here hopefully trying to convey as states are trying to figure out ways in which to engage here. And I want to point out one more thing that Michelle raised early on is this is the awards that have gone out are for 2 years. There's opportunities for states to adapt that now that you've thought more deeply about what that can look like. But there's going to be subsequent funding in years to come as well. And you should think about long-term ways in which you can continue to build and grow these programs to effectively save lives. So I am really thankful to everybody. There's one question that stood out in the chat that I want to make sure that we address. And I'll put this to the group real quick. We have stakeholders beyond just those that are going to be responsible for creating these advisory councils, right? Beyond the folks who are putting forward this work. We have folks on from congressional offices, potentially even grassroots will watch this. For folks that aren't involved in the process, and I'll put this to all of our panelists. What is it that they can do, that congressional offices can do with their vested interest to ensure what kind of role can they have when it comes to these grants to make sure that plans and outreach is in effect? I know there's a lot to unpack there and a lot of different directions to go, but I open that up to our panelists to be able to respond to if you're interested. And Kuko, I see you. Oh, Michelle, you've unmuted first, so I'm gonna put it to you first.
Thanks, Christian. I will say that all of the funding, it goes to a state organization or the state administering agency for each of the states that receive funds. And so I think elected officials, community members, any stakeholder who is interested in sharing their voice on how a state uses these funds should reach out to their state administering agency. If you go to that website I referenced earlier that lists all the awards that are made, it will list which organization within a state received those dollars. And on the Office of Justice Programs website, we have contact information for most of the state administrating agencies for these awards. And if you have any challenges finding out who your SAA is, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. But that is really an opportunity to try and inform how the dollars are spent within states. And again, those crisis intervention advisory boards are supposed to be reflective of the community, of the professions and disciplines working in this arena. And so again, reaching out to the SAA to see if there's an opportunity to serve or recommend entities or individuals to serve on those boards, I think is a way to be able to make sure that your voice is heard.
Great. And Kuko.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I find myself saying this the last couple of months. If we're going to call gun violence a public health issue, then we need to ensure that the funding for this work is out of public health or a related field. In most states, the administrating agencies for this type of work is going to be corrections or justice or some those areas. So I think that one of the roles is to really begin to recognize, and again, I don't mean this in a bad way, but there is a particular lens or bias that comes with that. That we need to recognize. And so I think that the role for folks is to, if we're really trying, if what we're saying is we want to engage different communities and diverse communities, are these really the right entities to be driving that process? Or can we look at partnerships or housing these funds in different places and begin to ensure that we can affect the process that way? Because as I said before, what is very clear is that the muscle that our systems do not have is a muscle that works with diverse populations and includes them in the solution and in the identification of problems. So I would hope that the role that folks play is really trying to help nudge this process in a way where it does reach these communities that continue to be impacted disproportionately.
It's a fantastic point, Kuko. And just to tie those pieces together, right? One of the roles that external stakeholders can have here is to Michelle's point too, right? These advisory councils are meant to be interdisciplinary. They're meant to be reflective of the community. And I think what Kuko is driving home, which is really important, is that if we want to have a public health approach, that means that all of these communities, all these stakeholders need to be a part of that decision-making body. And the states have the opportunities to put those together. So one of the questions you can be asking your administrative bodies is exactly what Michelle laid out. Who's at that table? Should you be recommending that some of the stakeholders that Kuko is identifying are also a part of those conversations so that you can make sure that a true public health approach is being brought forward, and that you're not just considering implementation as law enforcement executing orders, but really thinking through how do we make sure that the community understands what crisis intervention truly is and all of the mechanisms at their disposal, including their role as petitioners in some instances or as educators in some instances, in ways that they can have a tangible impact in preventing gun violence. And that has to be, I think, probably a part of this process. And it certainly was a part of the legislative intent as these discussions were going on. So it's a really important part of the discussion. I am going to try to end us on time here. I'm really so impressed. I learned a lot. I hope others did too. What an incredible group here. And I hope other folks take away the same lesson that I have in this process and understanding incredible work that is being done on this issue. There's no need to, in a lot of ways, you can, as you're forming these processes, you can learn from folks doing the work rather than starting from scratch. And we hope that becomes evident the more that we engage. We don't want this to be the end of the conversation. We'll have some supplemental materials, but please reach out to us. You'll see email addresses for all of our speakers today right here. And if you're interested in speaking with any of us, we'd be very eager to have that conversation, even if it's just to bounce some ideas off. And I just want to thank from the bottom of my heart our speakers once again for taking the time to join us today, for everybody in attendance for joining us today. We're incredibly excited about this opportunity to really prevent gun violence before it happens. We're eager to work with you to execute that goal, to speak directly to audiences that'll have the greatest impact. And we hope that this webinar was able to offer additional insights into how you can use these funds or how you can engage your agencies to use these funds to work towards those goals. So 1 minute over, we'll take it as a win. Really appreciate everybody joining us today. And please reach out if you have any follow-up after today's presentation. Thank you so much.